Hey Queens, welcome to the Sister Circle podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing candid conversations, information, and resources regarding women's health, mental health, motherhood, and wellness. And I am your homegirl and host, Faith Alaribe. So go ahead and get comfortable, Queen. Let's dig in. Hey y'all. So today I have the privilege of sitting down with psychologist and therapist, Dr. Danielle Simmons, and we have a conversation about the pursuit of healing from generational trauma. So for me, this episode is kind of personal, but it's also really necessary. And I share a lot about my experience as it relates to my own trauma, the complexity of my father's passing during my pursuit of healing, and also I talk about my multiple stints with therapy. For most, I know that mental health or mental illness and therapy, that these are all like taboo topics. But what I really seek to do with this episode and with others is to remove that stigma by speaking openly about my own mental health challenges and experiences, as I really feel like that these are the topics and conversations that we need to normalize having more often than not. So with that being said, you don't want to miss this. It's good. Let's get into it. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how you came to do this work.
Yes. So thank you so much, Faith, for having me be a part of this podcast. I feel so honored to share a topic that I'm so passionate about. I live wellness, if I can say that. As a psychologist, I have a private practice downtown. I have 2 clinicians that work with me. We do a lot of individual therapy, couples therapy, as well as groups, specializing in the services offered to African American women. We provide services to others who don't identify that way, but I really would say that's our specialty. And so being able to offer folks a space to process difficult emotions, form an intimate connection, heal from generational trauma. I think there's just so many components of wellness. And so as an individual therapist, I also like to do workshops, trainings, presentations. And so my husband and I have a consultation service that we provide. We'll go into workplace and provide diversity training, just really ensuring that those of us that have been disenfranchised, those of us that have been sort of pushed to the margins, we can receive a high quality of care. We can exist in the world and take up space. And so I started doing this work. I want to say, this would be funny to say right out of the womb. Like my mom always tells stories of, I was like her little doll. She would just hold me and talk to me. My dad passed away when I was pretty young. And so I think being her support was natural. I had to do that. I stepped into that role. I didn't really have a choice. And so it was quite natural to have that become a career. I am a person who loves being connected to people deeply. I don't really understand surface connections. Like if you know me, you know we going pretty deep pretty early on, because to me, that's where the real connection lies. And so I think growing up, witnessing grief so early, witnessing my mom's struggle really helped me become just, I think, the empath I am. Like, I think I was created to do this work, and I've always found great joy in it. I like what I do. I sometimes joke, I would do this for free. And I think I do sometimes. I don't mean to. But it's just, it comes so naturally to be available to others and to really try to help them find their path.
Tell me this. I'm really curious to learn more about this particular topic. Generational trauma. I guess my first question would be, how would you define generational trauma? Or maybe it's a 2-part question. How would you define trauma? And then how is that compared to generational trauma?
Right. So I like to think of trauma I hear a lot of people talk about a big T, meaning the big traumatic events, whether that's going off to war, being in combat, maybe experiencing some sort of abuse, trauma in that way. I think people think of that as big T, but I think of trauma like holistically. I think those events that happen in your life where you're just feeling really challenged by it, it can be burning yourself on the stove, right? Like there's so many events that scar us deeply. It's not just that it happens on our surface, but it really sort of gets ingrained and encoded, many of us, into our DNA. And so there's a concept of like a trauma-versary. If you experience a trauma around a certain time, I wouldn't be surprised, and I encourage my clients, don't be surprised if a year from now, around that same time of day, you feel some sort of intense emotional response. That's because our body really does sort of keep an imprint of those significant life events. Now, when you think of generational trauma or intergenerational trauma, I'm thinking about things that have happened to individuals that are not you. It's in your lineage. Maybe it's realizing, like, I don't know why, but I have a really strong reaction to certain triggers, even though I myself haven't been a survivor of a certain assault. But we can feel that. It sort of reverberates through our system, even if we weren't the ones to directly experience it. Kind of like a form of vicarious trauma. So that can happen either through just knowing of the traumas that our loved ones have endured or our ancestors have endured, but more specifically, it might be through some of the socialization, some of the things we learned through being in close proximity to them, right? Like if we have parents or loved ones who have coped a certain way, when we find ourselves coping and responding that way, sometimes maladaptively, that's a form, I think, of generational trauma. Those are, you have not endured the crises, right? Or you weren't confronted with that, but you still bear the weight of it.
So when you say like coping,
Mhm.
what might that look like?
Well, I like to think of coping in two, right? I say maladaptive coping and then adaptive coping. I think the maladaptive coping are the things that we do to survive that may not be so healthy for us. It might be the things that bring about greater negative consequences. And so, let's say, for example, right now, marijuana has been legalized, but I think there's a way that a lot of us misuse marijuana, and there's a way that we maladaptively use marijuana to cope. It's not intended to be an all day kind of experience, but so many of us, we feel so much emotion, so much difficult time handling the reality of our situations that we escape, right? And so any form of escapism, whether it's through a substance, overeating, over sexting, I mean, there's just so many ways. But it's really geared at coping. It's really geared at moving through a really difficult situation. I think all of us trying to survive 2020 and 2021, we've all probably had to develop some really rich coping strategies, some of which are great. And I hope we continue after this pandemic, but some of them probably need to be challenged and reevaluated.
Interesting. I remember it was, I think this was my second or third bout of therapy, and my therapist was talking about how, oh wow, you've experienced a lot of trauma in your life. And I was like, really? It was interesting for me. I just felt like I had these, experiences that were just a part of life, but I
Mhm.
never, I guess, had saw them from a lens of them being traumatic experiences.
Yeah.
So, and you talk about like coping, maladaptive coping, etc. Um, but what are some of the implications of generational trauma, and how might it show up in our lives?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples. So I brought up the substance use earlier. I think that's one that we see a lot. I think others are associated, like let's say your spending habits. Like I think
Mhm.
generational trauma can show up around our finances for sure. There's a way that the way we move through the world is greatly impacted by what we consume, what we learn. And so some of us have just learned some really poor life skills because the folks who were raising us, they were traumatized as well. I hear stories of my parents grew up during the Depression, or I am a family who deals with immigration issues and challenges, right? There are so many ways that that kind of stuff just kind of sits on you. It sits on your shoulders. Those of us that have all kind of back pains, GI issues, headaches, migraines, right? Like your body is a vessel that cannot store that much stress. And so what trauma does is it kind of, this fight or flight can kick in. You perceive a threat and your body is like, let me protect you. And when you stay in that heightened state for a prolonged period, it really does have significant health effects. So there is this concept, Faith, called, there's like this idea of 8 dimensions of wellness. And across the 8 dimensions, these dimensions might capture your education, your finances, your romantic and interpersonal relationships. I mean, it's 8 dimensions that allow you to kind of check. And out, we can include those in some resources for folks, because I think if we understand what are the 8 dimensions of wellness that I need to be checking into, and then seeing how does trauma show up in those 8 dimensions, because it really can show up across the board. Are you repeatedly picking partners that are unavailable? Are you repeatedly in relationships where there's an element of abuse or control or manipulation, right? There's just so many ways that our day to day choices, we might not even realize they're rooted in trauma, unresolved trauma, or unaddressed trauma. I'd rather say addressed rather than resolved, because this isn't about a destination. It's not getting to a place where you're no longer experiencing these things. I think it really is about recognizing the importance of how your past has impacted you, how your day to day experiences impact you, and then making some intentional, mindful decisions moving forward.
How might you say that generational trauma it begins to kind of really like shape who we are? Those things you talk about, understanding some of the traumas of our parents and things like that. But what about the traumas in which we don't understand, right?
Exactly.
That we don't know about, and how might that really shape who we are, and how might it,
Seriously.
show up in our day-to-day lives?
Right. I think living as a Black person in this world is quite traumatic, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't know moment to moment if our safety is going to be threatened. There's always for me, it feels like there's this looming cloud, right? And so trying to stay connected to the light, trying to stay positive, trying to stay optimistic and hopeful, like that is so exhausting for so many of us, because the weight of the world can feel like it's right upon us, especially as Black women. We will show up, we
Mhm.
like, I got it, let me fix it. But really, we have to be careful that some of that desire to help, desire to fix is not our trauma response. I know some women, actually, the artist SZA, she recently came out and said, if I'm not super productive, I'm bored. And I was thinking, that boredom doesn't have to be a bad thing. Sometimes those of us who have experienced trauma, even prenatal trauma, so our mom, while
Mm.
we were in the womb, experienced something traumatic, our sensitivity to that, we have a heightened sort of reaction. And then what ends up happening is we don't know how to sit still. We don't know how to chill and relax. We don't know how to trust, right? It really
Yeah.
does have a way of just rewiring some of our biochemistry. And so there's some really powerful therapy interventions to help folks, one, increase your understanding of what are your trauma responses, what are your triggers, and then what are some real good strategies to self soothe, regulate, de escalate a situation.
I want to continue along that thread of like this inherited generational trauma and
Hmm.
how it shapes who we are, right? So I'll give an example. You know, my relationship with my mother, I realized that there are a lot of things in which she believed about herself, she
Hmm.
then imposed upon me, right?
Hmm.
So whether it is, oh, I have these big arms, or whether it is, I'm serious. I know that that might sound
These
like
no,
crazy,
no,
like
that's a
out of this
really good
world,
one.
but like, really imposing their beliefs upon you, right? So whether you're living in fear and you're scared to travel because your mama is
Hmm.
like, girl, you can't be going over there, over there, somebody might go and get you. So the next thing that
Exactly.
you know, there's something that you've always wanted to do, something is small or trivial, is
Right.
travel the world. You don't do because your mom or your parent or your guardian has
Yeah.
imposed their beliefs upon you.
Oh, it's such a good
So
example.
I'm really interested in learning more about like how does that really shape,
It
you know,
really does. Because I know some folks who don't go away to college for that reason, Faith. They may be very interested in exploring a study abroad, or I actually heard a quote once of someone who's like, I will never get on a boat. I can't drink all that water. And I remember
what?
they're like, if I could not consume that perceived threat, then I'm not going to even expose myself to it. So there is a certain way we might live more vigilantly. Sometimes I think it can deprive us of opportunities if it's unaddressed. when we can address it and talk about it, like I love that you brought up that example of your mom and arms, because body image is a big one too. There's a way that so having acceptance in our bodies, again, in this society, the standards of beauty don't always track us. And
Mhm.
so when we trying to show up and be our whole selves, maybe we do get confronted. I don't know if this happened for you, but a lot of older Black women that I encounter sometimes will say stuff like, oh, why'd you choose natural hair versus straightened hair, right? Because
Right.
during the times that they were being reared, straight hair was perceived as better, right? Like, or dark skin, right? There's just some of those things. And when we have that internalized, maybe self hatred, sometimes we can trace it back to, oh, that was never mine's anyway. And so, one
Mhm.
intervention I do with my clients is to really let's talk about what's yours and what's not yours. Because some of the stuff we carry day to day, it's not ours, it's not from our experience, it's someone else's. And if we can surrender that and give it to them, I think that really can free us.
That's good. That's real good. I think about generational trauma and, not only how it shows up in like our individual lives, right?
Mhm.
But I think about how it shows up in our relationships,
Mhm.
right? Right now, I feel like my life is like I am a living, walking, breathing example of the effects of generational trauma, particularly around the passing of my father and how it has shaped or informed my relationships with my siblings and how I'll give this example. When I was younger, like I grew up without my father really a part of my life, right?
Mhm.
My parents divorced when I was about 3.5. And so I just have, like my experience with my father is very different from my siblings because I think that I'm the baby by 6 years with my brother, by like 13, 14 years for my middle sister,
Mhm.
and almost 18 years with my oldest sister.
Mhm.
And so, they have very different experiences with my father than I do.
Mhm.
But I'm reminded in his passing of like this essentially, like, I just don't owe you not an apology
Mhm.
or just like a reason as to why I did what I did.
Exactly. Yeah.
It reminds me when I was young, I used to write him letters all the time.
Yes.
I used to write letters, and I remember crumbling up, the school paper and then tossing it. And then by the time I finally got the letter perfect, it'd be like this pile of balled up
Mm.
letters. And then, whether it was months would pass or weeks would pass that I would talk to my dad, I'd be like, hey, Dad, did you get my letter? And he would just completely pretend as if
Mm.
I didn't ask him a question.
Mm.
And it was like he never felt like the need, or he just never felt like he had to give me more than what he, you know, was able to give.
Well, and this is the thing. First off, Faith, I'm sorry for your loss, because I know that no matter how close we are to our parents, there's something about the connection to them. They can be as imperfect as possible, but as children, we crave that connection. We
Oh
crave that
yeah.
approval and acceptance. And so I'm so sorry that he died before he could really see you. It sounds like he didn't have the opportunity. Now, I'm not sure in those kind of relationship dynamics if it's a choice that folks are making or an inability. I really do feel like when our parents fail us, it feels like such a personal affront. It's hard to see them as whole humans who have their own baggage, have their own insecurities, might even have their own envy of their children. There's so many ways that the parent child dynamic, it's just a replication of other interpersonal relationships. And so if your
Mhm.
father had strained relationships across the board, I just would imagine it's really hard to cultivate something unique and different with you. Not to say he didn't want to, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him either.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just recognize that some of us, we don't have the skills. Some of us were not taught how to love and trust and show up, be accountable. Like, we
Mhm.
just weren't given the space. And no shade. I think the truth is a lot of us have a lot of growth to do around increasing the awareness of how we show up in the world and how we impact spaces we enter.
Mm.
There's something about having greater self awareness of what's the impact I have on others. I think a lot of us are really aware of how others make us feel, but we're not always so aware of how is my actions impacting others. So, Faith, you don't know, you know, your father never responded to the letters, but I don't know how you writing the letters may have, I don't know how it made him feel. I'm grateful that you wrote
Mhm.
the letters either way, you know, like whether he ever read them or not. I'm so glad you gave yourself the space to move through that pain, to use writing as a way of connecting and healing.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you about that though, about not having, I mean, whether it's not having the language, not having the tools, or just the ability to
Mm-hmm.
show up in a way that I needed him to show up for me.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, I
And
think
if
that,
he had greater awareness of the impact he was having on you, I don't know if he would have done something differently, but my hope is through some honest conversations with which I know when our loved ones pass, it sort of feels like an end of an opportunity to mend and heal with them. But because of my belief in spiritual presence and ancestors, I feel like there's still healing work that can happen between you and your father, even in the absence of his physical body.
yeah, I mean, I think that, it's a continuous process for
Oh, I'm
sure.
sure.
Definitely a continuous process. And I think that
I'm over Faith, I'm over here like, you know, as a child who lost her father, like it is an ongoing, continuous journey. Can we say that trauma healing is a lifelong process?
oh yeah, oh yeah. And I think that, it's funny. I oftentimes, like, I've been going to therapy consecutively for like 3 years at this point, almost 3 years. And so a lot of times people are like, dang, you still in therapy? And I'm like, yeah, it's a continuous journey. Like, I got a whole lot of healing to do, right? It's not like, okay, suddenly I wake up and it's like, oh, I'm healed and I'm
Right.
ready to go forth and be great. But I think that because it is something that I so deeply want to process and get through, not get over, like,
Mm,
I am committed to even if it becomes this lifelong process. But I feel
mhm,
like therapy has been so tremendously helpful to me in my life, particularly in these last 3 years where I've experienced so many different changes, right? And just different chapters of my life. Like, when I first started
mhm,
going to therapy, my reason for going to therapy was because I wanted to process, having experienced a miscarriage. I wanted to address some of the demons that were glaring in my face that I felt were holding me back from my ability to conceive.
mm,
And I say that to say, because for me, it was like, okay, I had this miscarriage, right? I've addressed it. I've had, a surgery, but I wanted to ensure that my behavior was not, it was reflective of what I felt a mother should be to a
mm,
child.
mhm,
And it's like, it's like I wanted to make sure that, having the multiple glasses of wine at night, or, you
mm,
know, not being able to look in the mirror and loving myself, right,
mhm,
or taking care of myself, was
mhm.
something that my daughter, or now soon to be daughters, plural, right, will be able to see as something that's normative behavior,
Yeah,
right? I wanted
yeah,
to show up as my best version of myself, or at least a better version of myself than I was at that point. And,
yeah.
it's transformed, right? And I've addressed all kinds of things at this point.
Mm,
But it really, the process of therapy, it allowed me to get my voice back, which I had lost. It allowed me to find like the confidence within to push forward in times that I thought that I couldn't.
mm.
And it's just been an incredible experience. And so when people ask why, or if I'm always, being an advocate telling you about, yeah, I go to therapy or something along those lines, it's because I know that it works and I'm not ashamed at all.
Faith, as a therapist, it's so remarkable. I love hearing you talk about your experience because so many folks would greatly benefit from taking space for a prolonged period of time, but feel maybe like they don't have that choice. And I know therapy is something that for many is an expensive investment, not just of finances, but your time, your energy.
Yeah.
We asking you to go there. And I
Uh-huh.
think the same way you get the question of like, you still in therapy? As a therapist, I get the question of like, you got a therapist? Yes. I
Good.
keeps I keeps me a therapist. There is no way that I could do this work well without a therapist. I really feel like that space to connect to myself and my traumas, my pain, that might get triggered by what my clients are going through, that might just get triggered by life.
Hmm.
Earlier, when you talked about relationships, that is one of the primary reasons folks seek therapy, is to address relational issues, whether it's at work or with a partner or with their children. Like, our relationships can bring us the greatest joy, but they also can bring us a great source of stress. And so, because relationships are ongoing, it makes sense that therapy would be ongoing, right? Trauma isn't just about past things. We experience ongoing day to day stressors, right? We experience ongoing day to day things that could really impact our mental health and our wellness. So I'm really excited for you that you were committed to a therapy process. You allowed the goals to evolve, because I think some folks will say like, "Oh, I'm just here to address one thing and done." And for some that's fine, but
Right.
for others you recognize, "Oh, I've addressed that. I've gotten some resolution around that. Now let me go even further. Oh, and then this as well."
Yeah. So, what would you say to some of the folks who are fearful of therapy, but know that it's something that they probably should do
Yeah.
and or need to do?
Yeah.
I often say, like, I know that it can be intimidating, it can be scary. I mean, even the process of finding the right therapist, right?
Oh,
Yeah. How would you encourage more folks
yeah.
to access that?
Yeah, it's really important for me to acknowledge how difficult therapy is. Like, seeking therapy, the process should not be so difficult, even for those of us with great insurance. Like, it is still a challenge to find that good fit. You want somebody who you're going to feel safe with and comfortable with. You're okay being imperfect in their presence. You don't feel like you have to perform. Sometimes when I'm working with um, clients who in the world they represent professionalism and they've got it all together, they want to show up in the room the same way, and I'm like, I don't need that. You don't need that. I
Hmm.
want to see the most unwell, unpolished, unperfected part of you, because that's where your pain lies. And so I would say the part of the commitment to therapy is committing to finding someone, and I think even just committing to finding someone is a part of the therapeutic process. Hopefully, you feel encouraged and empowered to interview individuals to find that really good fit. There's a really dope resource out here, psychologytoday.com.
Yep.
You can go on there, you put in what your health insurance is, you put in the concerns you're trying to address. You can look at people's pictures, read their bios, check out their website. I think that's a great start. The next step would be making some phone calls and seeing, like, what is our fit actually like? Asking them the hard questions. Have you worked with someone to address X, Y, and Z issues? What is your belief about how change can occur? Or, like, what are your ideas about medication? Like, I really think finding that really good fit, because you don't want somebody who's going to make you feel either shamed or
Mhm.
embarrassed. Um, but I really will say therapy is a commitment, and it is difficult to commit to. And so I ask folks, are you truly ready for the process? Because if you're not ready to have your guts sort of like, and I will own that I'm an emotion focused therapist, Faith. Like, there are different providers, some who do hypnotherapy, and there's so many forms, right? It could be art therapy. There's just so many options, but what I provide is talk therapy, and I'm an emotion focused therapist who really wants to help you connect to what's beneath the surface, right? We don't have to always talk about like, and now what's the strategy for what you're going to do. It's more about like, let's really explore, like, how how are you feeling? Folks
Mhm.
ask us that all the time. How you doing? But do we really get to talk about like how we're doing? So I would say, if you're afraid of therapy, one, you don't have to be, but it makes sense that you are, especially if you watch the depictions of therapy on TV, right? It's some white person sitting across from you, you laid out on the couch. And I do have a couch, so you can lay down. Folks can lay down if they want to. But the truth of the matter is, you don't have to. It's really about finding that space where you feel like you can really just like bare your soul.
Mhm.
And so, okay, so you asked the question of what would I say to folks who are afraid or reluctant. I would say have the conversation really honestly, maybe with folks who have pursued therapy. It takes a lot of courage to commit to this process, because you never know what's going to come up. I think it's like diving into really murky water. you don't really know what's going to come out. You don't really know what's going to come to the surface. But if you're in a trusting, safe relationship, hopefully you can develop the skills to cope with whatever comes up and comes out. I would never want to encourage folks to come to therapy under any false assumptions. It's healing is not this like I came in, I talked to you once, I cried real good. Whew, I'm done with
Right.
that. It is ongoing. And sometimes you feel like you took two steps back because all of a sudden maladaptive behaviors are resurfacing, right? When I've had folks talk about when I really started to dive into my work, I initially felt a little bit better, but then it felt like I took a dip and a turn. But eventually you start to see that, it's just about being committed, patient. I think consistency is important. It's not
Hmm.
just about the work you do in this 1 hour, right? It really is about creating a wellness lifestyle. I'm always talking about a toolkit.
Yes,
Like
yes.
what do you have in your toolkit so that when you leave this room, we done opened your stuff up? What are you doing to manage what's coming up during the week so that it's not like I did my work that 1 hour, now the rest of my week I'm not attending to it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
hard to keep that stuff at the forefront. I think without, I think visual cues, visual reminders like to have you doing the work. So the folks I think who have the most success, if we were talking about say church for example, the folks who do daily devotionals, right, or take time to meditate, because beyond religion, I mean, spirituality is one of the 8 dimensions of wellness. It's a really important component for so many folks, especially Black women. I don't think many of us talk about spirituality in so many ways, but we need that space to tap into something larger than just like our physical plane, right? We are so much
Yeah.
more than that, you know?
Absolutely. And when I was originally looking for a therapist, that was one of the things that I was looking for. I knew that my former therapist was actually a Black male. Shout
Mhm,
out to Dr. Brown. He was incredible. I'm grateful for him. But I knew that in this particular stage of my life that I wanted
mhm,
a woman. And then I also wanted there to be a spiritual component so that
mhm,
that could be something that, was woven throughout like my
mhm,
process, because my spirituality is something that's really important to me.
mhm,
Notice I said spirituality and not necessarily religion, because while I do believe in God and all those things, I believe and have respect for a lot of different types of spirituality practices as well as religions as well. So
mhm.
it was really important for me to be able to talk about everything from manifestation to God, right? Universe to like faith, you need a word.
Mhm,
So that was something that was important. And I think that me going through psychology today allowed me to, check those things off the box, right? And so when I
mhm,
went in to begin doing my interviews with prospective therapists, those were questions that I brought up. And so I was also able to see who resonated most with me and, kind of move forward. So
mhm,
I was really, really grateful for
mhm,
the setup of psychology today. There are also, tons of other directories and resources and such, but I found
mhm.
psychology today to be most helpful.
Yeah, yeah. There's one actually that Chance the Rapper. So Chance has this organization called Social Works. This is his non for profit.
Okay.
And he is putting together this guidebook. The plan, and this specifically for my Chicago folks, the plan is to have this resource where you can find providers who you might not find on Psychology Today. So Psychology Today, I think because it's a paid subscription, right? Like there
Oh,
are some places that offer really amazing services, but they're not on a listserv like that. And so things about like the west side of Chicago or the south side of Chicago, like it's so wonderful to have a resource that's going to really focus in on what's available to us, and that moves away from like private insurance. There's self-pay options because again, I think accessibility is a big issue for therapy.
yes.
There's some people who are
Mhm.
like, I can't afford that. I haven't met my deductible. I don't even know what plan to pick, right? We don't know a whole lot HMO versus PPO. It's just
Mhm.
like when you're navigating that realm, it's really important to have some support so that you can make informed decisions. Because I get calls often for folks who are like, do you accept my insurance? Or what's your sliding scale fee? As a private practitioner, our own, it's kind of a boutique. And so although I reserve slots for sliding scale, I want to be honest that therapy is really like you really have to be committed to the process and invest in it. And
Yeah.
sometimes that means, right, like planning for it, saving for it. It becomes a monthly expense. Like for so many of us, I got to pay my rent, I got to pay my therapy bill, you know?
And I mean,
Hmm.
you think about it, if, that means that you, instead of going to brunch, every weekend with the homies,
Hmm.
instead save that money to go towards a therapy session. I think that it's something that's totally worth it.
Hmm.
Um, just like, my girlfriend, he always says that you have time for the things that you want to make time for.
Hmm. It's true.
Right. And so while yes, it's a big commitment, but if it
Hmm.
is something that you want to do and you are committed to, you'll make a way. You will find a way for sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm glad that you mentioned some of the resources, which we'll also include in the show notes of this episode, so that people who may not be able to afford it, we got some resources for y'all. So hold on to that.
There are low cost counseling options and this high quality, right? I don't want folks to think if I'm not paying a lot, I'm not getting a lot. The gift is we maintain, I think, in order for me to maintain, this is a part of how I give back, right? I didn't get into this field to get rich. I would have chose business or something else if that was the case.
Right.
Like this is really about having an impact, right? And if there is a way that I can offer support, one of the things I've done is started a group. So there are some individuals I meet with individually, but there's a small subset that I'll meet with as a group because that makes it more affordable. But also there's an opportunity for shared learning, right? Sharing
Mhm.
your experience, building community that way, especially during a time when we're so socially isolated.
Yeah.
It has been, from what I've heard, it's been really a positive addition to the practice. Folks are really appreciative of having other spaces to gain support. And so I'm a fan, Faith, of like diversifying how you gain support, really
Yeah.
being intentional about that. So this podcast, talking to providers, like I really think it's a great way to just disseminate information that folks might not get otherwise.
Yeah. It sounds like you're having some small sister circles,
I mean,
therapeutic sister circles.
it's
Yeah.
pretty dope. Well, in this, I will brag for a moment. This group is so dope because I've been able to bring some cisgender individuals, some transgender individuals together. I mean,
Yes.
oh, I'm just love. I get so fed by my work, Faith. I could talk about the practice all day. I just feel like it's been so rewarding.
So I want to get back to the topic of trauma, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm really really interested in learning, particularly about like those traumas that we don't know about from
Mm,
our parents, etc. So my question for you is around like how trauma is passed down from generation to generation, or I've also heard it termed as like carried across generations.
yeah.
How is this, usually done, and
Yeah.
what might it look like when it shows up?
Yeah, yeah. So there is this idea. I mean, truly, there is something happening neurobiochemically that we are not seeing on the surface, right? This isn't something that is necessarily going to show up through a microscope, but there are strands of DNA that reflect who we are, impact and shape who we are, how we are. And so I think that's one of the major ways that research is talking about trauma being transmitted from one generation to another is there something in our cells, like on a cellular level, we have this sort of mark or imprint of our parents, our grandparents, even our great grandparents. So, beyond just the biochemical part, there's also the socialization, the behaviors we learn. And so, if you witnessed your mom and dad having intense arguments and fights, one, that's really traumatic for a young person to try to process. But then, two, that teaches you sort of when I'm in a place of distress or conflict, this is how I will respond, right? If you witness parents throwing things, maybe you find yourself just wanting to pick up something and chuck it, even if historically you've never done that, right? I've had people question, like, where did this come from? I felt almost like it was an outer body experience, right? It almost
Mhm.
feels like something outside of us can take over. And this is where like mindfulness strategies come into place, being really intentional, really questioning, why am I engaging in this way? If you've ever been in a
Right.
partnership, maybe you hear your partner be like, you are just like your mama or just like your daddy, right? Like we really are in some ways quite similar to them. It doesn't have to be like a curse or a sentence that will always be that way. But I do think we have to be honest about what did I learn What did my rearing teach me? What are the scars I carry? What are the strengths I carry? Um,
So,
mm,
in that same vein, so something that you said kind of prompted me to ask this question, particularly around how we communicate
mhm,
in our relationships with our
mhm.
partners, right? Um, like, is that a result of the things that we've seen? Like, so for example, I think that, across the board, folks will probably say one of the hardest things about marriage or partnerships is that communication component, right?
Mhm,
But
right.
either way, it's like,
Mm,
it's like we're living or we're communicating like from two completely different perspectives. And so
yeah,
not how might it show up, but how could we really take a step back so that we're able to better communicate our
right.
feelings in that moment and so that we can get to a point of resolve.
Right. Well, and it's funny. I'm glad you brought up those gender differences because I do think sometimes when we start to boil it down to what's causing someone to act a certain way, respond a certain way, we like, you know how boys are, you know how men are. The truth of the matter is, men have not been given much space in our society to be more emotional or to be more touchy feely, right? I have a little nephew and I hear his dad tell him all the time, like, stop crying, man up. It breaks
Mm,
my heart because whoever gets with this young man is probably going to have a real challenge getting him to reconnect to that, right? If he loses that thing that he came out of the womb so naturally doing, if he loses that, it's going to be really hard for him to reconnect to that in adulthood. And so I do think if you think about how you were raised, the messages you were taught very early on, that is a form of it carrying over because I imagine what your parents are instilling in you is what their parents instilled in them, right? It's not that our parents maybe don't want to hug us, but it's that they weren't raised being hugged. And so then
right.
you end up just transferring that behavior. And then you get a partner, and maybe a partner's like, man, you're not real affectionate. And you may not even understand why are they asking that of me? Why does it seem like they even need that? Well, one, it's a very valid need that we all have. Like many of us
Yeah.
want to be connected emotionally, but it's a little easier to connect up here. And so if you find yourself in a hard conversation, trying to win or prove a point or storm out, again, I would encourage folks to reflect, where did you learn that behavior? You
Mm.
know, who taught you that? Was it someone in your immediate world or was it something you witnessed on TV? Like some of the dope coping skills I use, Faith, these are things I learned, right? I had to be taught how to respond, how to not blow up, how to not let the first thing that comes up come out of my mouth. That's what I meant about mindfulness and intentionality. Every choice you make, moment to moment, right? You could be dismissive of somebody, you could be irritable and short, but does the feeling have to match a behavior? And for so many of us, there's like an automatic connection between that feeling and
Mhm.
that behavior. I think we have to interrupt any automatic pattern there.
There's this meditation that I do, and it was particularly helpful to me during a tough time when I was doing my work, and the title of it. I think her name is Dora Camus. I'll include it in the show notes, but it was called "From Reacting to Responding."
Mm,
Right? It's like, a lot of times we're reacting as opposed to
yes.
being pausing, like you said, right?
Come
And
on.
being thoughtful about the way that we convey whatever is next to come out of my mouth.
Mhm.
Um,
And again, if you're intentional about the impact your actions are having on another person, you'll be a little more thoughtful, right? Because sometimes we don't want to come off as short. We don't like when people come off as short to
right.
us. But if that's been the generational pattern of how the family has communicated with each other, if folks haven't inserted pauses and haven't asked the questions, it just becomes like you're practicing like a foreign language.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like there is a way
Yes.
that something can get normalized, right? Like frivolous spending or like there's certain behaviors, excessiveness. I was thinking, I love that y'all say I love you so much. I'm always talking to my clients about self-love. Where did you learn the notion of self-love? How did you see that modeled, right? So many of us are having to relearn that,
Oh
reparent
yeah.
ourselves. So as a therapist, I do a lot of work around like healing your inner child. Let's connect to that part of you that maybe wants to be heard. Let's create some space for it, and then let's let the adult in you give that child space. So it just feels like you and your husband have found a way to say, no, we're not going to continue the patterns we learned. We're not going to just repeat it. We're going to create something very different for our lineage.
I think that that was one of my, a lot of times women, they grow up and they dream about, their weddings and all of these things. And I was not that girl. I knew that I wanted to be married, right? I think that, and even when I got a little bit older, I was excited about, just the whole idea of getting a ring,
Mm,
and what that symbolized for me. But the thought of marriage, it was something that I was just like, damn, I want to be so intentional about this,
mm,
because when I look at my father's, when I look at his track record, he had been married, I think 4 times and twice to the same woman. Um, and then when I look at my mom, she was divorced from my father. And so
mm,
that was something that I did not want to, and I do not want to mirror in my own life.
right.
And so I knew that there were certain things that I had to be intentional about. There were certain things that I had to continue to work through, right? About the love that I have for myself, but then also what my expectations were of my partner and how they love me too.
Come on. I love this. Assess where your expectations come from, right? Some of us are trying to either replicate what we saw our parents have or trying to get as far away from that as possible,
Mhm.
right? But in that action to either replicate or get away from, you can lose what's authentically yours and you can miss an opportunity, right, to have realistic expectations. Now, for so many of us, partner selection is key. So many folks want, like, I don't know, I just feel like in our society, we are like, marriage is the thing, it's like a pinnacle of success. But to
Mhm.
be very honest, I have wanted so desperately to have us really challenge the notion of why do we want to get married? I know for myself, there was never a question of did I want to be a wife? I always wanted to be a wife, but why? Right?
Right.
I think it had a lot to do with either a fear of being alone. What would this mean about me if I didn't have partnership? I'm a woman who does not have children. I don't plan to ever have children. Even to express that, to be so honest about that, like I get pushback about that. I have people who are like, "Why?" And I just feel like there's a lot of expectations of what it means to be a
Mhm.
woman in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And we should have a right to exist in the ways that's true for us and real for us. And so I try not to be so mean or critical when my spouse depicts something, because I can usually tell where I'm like, "Ooh, I see your mama in you, or I see your daddy in you." I don't think it's nice to say those things and like during a fight or an argument. It's not to use it as a weapon or as an attack, but I do think it's a great opportunity for increasing self-awareness, because so many of us have to grieve what we never will have. We might desire to have the family and the job and the career, there's a certain lifestyle, the vacation. There is something that happens when we're grieving what we've surrendered, because I do think as a decision point, when you choose one thing, sometimes that means you're not choosing something else. And so if you're choosing to pursue education and to pursue career elevation, then maybe that does mean your partnership, prioritizing partnership, becomes maybe, gets moved to the back burner. And that's okay, but being honest about that. And some folks have found a way to balance these two, and I commend them because it
Mhm.
is hard work, right? To be a working mom, there's just so many things that we have to give up. I hear a lot of working moms express some amount of maybe guilt that I wish I could do more in either realm. I wish I could show up for work differently. I wish I could be more present at home. And the truth of the matter is, we do sort of have to divide our time, divide our effort. I think it takes a lot of grace, a lot of self compassion, a lot
Mhm.
of gentleness, and really trying not to live up to some standard or expectation, especially not on the social medias, right? You'll see on social
Right.
media, oh, she doing it all. She snapped back and she da 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 and she did. I
She
just feel like,
making gourmet meals for 6-month-olds, right? Her
come
husband.
on, her pets eating gourmet too, like for real. But that's not like, we don't have to have that as our standard, right? If other folks have been able to achieve it, there's no hate to them, no shade. I am grateful that we all get to do it differently and it gets
Yeah.
to look uniquely yours. And so, no two conversations are the same, no two marriages are the same. I really think there's no one right way to be. And if we could give ourselves a little more grace and sort of disentangle what are the messages I learned from my past, right? What are the lessons, the messages I learned from my family? How do I give myself permission to create something new and different? You this is so real. My heart goes out to all the mommy teachers right now, all the parent teachers, all the
Yes.
daddy teachers. I have so much empathy for y'all because the Wi-Fi going in and out, the babies need support, they need a snack. I just feel like I really feel sad that we are expected to continue acting as if the last 12 months have not been majorly traumatic. And I very honestly, I don't think we're going to see the full fallout of this for months to come, potentially years to come. There's just some way that what we've endured, and I'm speaking like it's the past. I want it to be the past. We are still very much in it, right? There's some way as CPS opens back up and these babies are expected to
I
return to
know.
school and the teachers, I'm like, who about to learn? Who is learning in this kind of stressful environment? And if they are learning in this stressful environment, what is that going to mean later in life about their level of stimulation, what they've gotten accustomed to?
Right.
What can they actually encode, right? The research says during traumatic events, you don't actually encode a lot of the data, right? You're in survival, flight or flight. Your brain,
Mhm.
the blood rushes from up here to your extremities to keep you safe. And so I do feel like this it's just so odd that we are trying to move as if this is not a life-changing experience that we're all collectively living through.
Totally
I
life
mean, because I
change.
haven't even brought up the political climate. I won't go there,
Oh,
Faith.
I mean, if we go there, then that's the whole
It's a
episode
whole,
right there, Doc. Like,
it's a
oh
whole
my
nother
gosh.
podcast. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. But
So
I have a lot of empathy for folks trying to keep it moving during this time. I
and
just want to say, because it's so difficult, that means our coping has to be way up. Okay. Our adjustment has to be way up. The self care strategies we use, we may have taken for granted long baths, long walks, long conversations with someone we deeply care about. Those things are vital right now because I think so many of us, we're compromised. We're short, we're irritable, we're stressed out. Maybe we're not getting enough physical exertion. As you said, we only go into the grocery store. So many of us derived a sense of joy from other forms of outside engagement. And it's really, we've had to get real creative, right? I'm grateful for virtual connections and meetups, but I know that there is something lost right now.
oh, totally. What I miss most is I just knew that I was gonna be the mama that had a house full of, parents and little kids running around for barbecues and, you know, having different like
Mhm.
traditions. Like last year we had the Black Santa that came and, the homies brought their kids and they took pictures and, everybody was hanging out and stuff like that. And to not be able to do those things really, really made me sad. But one of the things that you talked about was like still maintaining like a sense of connection. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that I have been really intentional about is like every Sunday, I reconnect with a friend of mine who I haven't connected with in a long time.
Mm.
And we would usually, and I schedule it, right? I put it on our calendars. I put the Zoom link and everything, right? So we cannot not show up.
Mm.
And intended hour long conversations turn into 2 3 hours
Yeah.
most of the times. But it's
Yeah.
so good to have like that connection.
Oh, Faith, that's such a great idea, right? These virtual meetups and hangouts, and I've heard about these virtual happy hours. I mean, there's just so many ways. I think that if we tap into our creativity, I mean, one of my favorite coping strategies is to like, let's connect to the youthful side of us. What did you
Mhm.
enjoy doing as a young person? Let's figure out, how do I bring a version of that into my adulthood? And I know what I used to love was hanging out with my friends, right? Being able to talk about who knows what without, and so now still being able to do it virtually. It is different. I miss hugs. I miss hugs so
Yeah, I
much.
miss hugs a
Uh,
lot. I miss hugs. I miss cooking for folks. Like cooking
mhm,
is definitely therapeutic for me.
mhm,
Um, like even when I have like a I'm struggling creatively, or if I'm frustrated about something,
mhm,
whatever it might be, I go in the kitchen and I just create. And that
mm,
is what really has really kept me, to be truthfully honest. And I know that my husband is probably really grateful for that, because he always
Exactly.
he always is getting a different meal. Like, I'm not somebody who cooks the same thing all the time whatsoever. So he benefits a lot from that. But I miss cooking and having one of my girlfriends or multiple girlfriends sitting at, the island, if they're sipping wine or, drinking tea while I'm cooking. But that used to bring me so much joy. So
Yeah.
that definitely is something that I miss, entertaining and engaging with folks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but finding those alternative kind of ways to connect has definitely been important. I hate to talk about something that was bringing joy, but then to kind of bring it back down. But one of the things that
That's life, Faith.
yeah, it is, right?
That's life.
It's like, but
One.
everything was going so well for so long, and then this,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm really interested. Mental illness, right,
Mm.
or mental health disorders, are they can they be a result of generational trauma?
Yes. Yes. So again, go to the biochemistry. The research says if your parents have anxiety, depression, psychosis, right, your chance of having those conditions or symptoms of those conditions, it goes up, right? We're at a higher risk for that, right? We have what some might call a genetic predisposition for some of that. And so we have to be very intentional of knowing our family history. So many of us have undiagnosed mental health issues in our family systems. Of course, that translates and it transfers down. One way it transfers down is that biological predisposition, kind of like a stress response. Your body knows, like, you may not see those symptoms until something really stressful happens, and then all of a sudden, the onset of depression or anxiety kicks in. That can happen, I think at a greater rate for those of us who have parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles with those conditions as well. So we just have to be very careful. Beyond that, watching how our parents manage their mental illness, that
Mm-hmm.
is a direct trauma response, right? Like if mom never sought therapy and never took medication, there might be some ways that you find yourself struggling to do that, right? Especially if your parents or your support system aren't supportive and honest and talking about that. In some spaces, we prefer not to talk about the severity of symptoms. Instead, we like, you had that one cousin. You like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're a little touched or special. I just feel like Black folks and folks of color, we have so much language to talk about illness without
So
actually
much.
naming it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier to dance around it. But the truth of it is, yeah, if those conditions go unaddressed, if they are not attended to appropriately, if we don't get into family therapy to talk about that, it certainly continues to show up in our lives.
My question to you is the way that we experience generational trauma or trauma in general different as Black folk or people of color?
Oh, it's such a good point. My answer as a Black therapist, as a Black woman, I'm going to say yes. I think the history of slavery is pivotal. It changed the game.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot take an entire group of people and treat us that way. You can and think that even though generations have passed, we still carry the weight of that. I certainly think the experiences of Black folks is unique to any other group, and maybe I'm biased, but I do think there's this experience. We can't move anywhere in the world without our Blackness being the first thing people see.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a part of the reason I get so bothered by this concept of color blindness. There is something so beautiful and unique about us and our experience, and we have to acknowledge it's going to look different than any other race and ethnicity. I think that the
Mm.
trauma of slavery is real, but also the ongoing systemic traumas, right? We
Yes.
are disenfranchised the most. You're hearing about Black mothers dying at disproportionate rates at the hospitals. Like, we are being traumatized in an ongoing way. So it's not just the past that makes us different, it's the current day-to-day experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I always would say, like, every day when I step out of my house, I'm reminded of my Blackness. It's not something that I can set aside or anything like that, but that is what I lead with, because before you hear me, before you know my story, you
Yes.
see me and you see this Black and this womanness.
Well, and
period.
I think that's a part of why we got so many degrees, Faith. We get degrees
Uh-huh.
because we want to sit at the table. We want to have influence. We want to try to change the trajectory.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason that we should not be a part of decision making, policy making, right? The things that directly affect us, we need to have a hand in. And so I think that's why we position ourselves the way we do. That's why we would choose career over family.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I actually, it's funny, you just brought me back to this place that I was once in. I remember I was preparing for a board meeting, um, and I was working in fundraising at the time. And I had my assistant, she was there, she was helping me, whatever. And I was like, okay, so and so is going to sit here, so and so is going to sit there. And she's like, well, where are you going to sit? And I was like, I'm not gonna be at the table. And she said,
Mm.
well, why not? Like you're the one behind all of this, you
Mm.
prepared executive director to say what she's supposed to say. You've done all of this. Like, why won't you sit at the table as well? And that actually was something, it was how I began my personal statement for grad school.
Mhm.
Like it was the why behind, why I wanted to pursue this degree, why I wanted
Mhm.
to, make this difference in, the world, all these things is because I wanted to have a seat at the table.
Yep.
But
Yep.
what was interesting at that moment, right, was that I didn't believe that I was worthy
Yeah.
to sit at the table unless I had this pursuit of this degree or unless I had this additional piece of paper. And what's
Right.
fascinating, nobody has ever even asked for this piece of paper.
Exactly.
All 50 plus, I think it was worth, $70,000 worth, right? Ain't nobody asked to see that piece of paper.
Mhm. Well, if we could get honest, again, I mean, the history of Black people in this country is we weren't even privy to education initially. And so the idea of us valuing it so much, like growing up, I was told being educated was being white, right?
Mm.
So there was a way that as a Black person, we didn't feel deserving of that education. We didn't feel even if we had a seat at the table, sometimes we're worried about our voice. Is it going to get heard? Are folks going to make space for us? Sometimes they do not, even when we have the fancy degrees, right?
Hmm.
There's just some way that our position in society, I think, really has gotten consistently challenged. And so we have to push outside of that. We have to say, even if I don't get a formal education, my grandfather had maybe no more than a fourth, fifth grade education, Faith, but his wisdom, one of the smartest people I ever met. So
Hmm.
I don't buy into the belief that only through formal education can we make it, but I do know that in our society, that's what helps us get that sort of external validation or cloud or whatever. Right. And I bought into it too. There was a reason I didn't stop at my master's. I knew that in order to have the impact I wanted to have, I needed the PhD, I needed the doctorate. And so now that I have it, I can make more choices about where I show up, how I show up. I really can sort of have a little more control over my schedule, my life. I feel like there's a greater flexibility to it. But to know that I deserve that, to know that I'm worthy of that, that was work I had to do in therapy.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely.
Can I say one more thing, Faith?
Yeah.
The thing that just happened where you said something that you said brought me right back to that boardroom. That is how trauma can also show up. Something someone says, a smell, a sound, all of a sudden
Yes.
you are taken back, you are transported to another time and place. Sometimes it's a great memory, it's positive, but sometimes it's trauma.
Hmm.
Sometimes you're sitting in your house, there is no immediate threat, and all of a sudden you are transported to a time when you were powerless, you were helpless, someone was doing something to you against your will, and then you start to have a visceral response. You're hyperventilating, right? You're having panic symptoms, and there is no immediate perceived threat. That's the power of the mind. That's the power of trauma.
So, I mean, so you talk about like how it can bring up panic, it can bring up, hyperventilation, like all these different things. And you talk about having a toolkit. Like I know that that's something that's huge for you, right?
Hmm.
Um I guess my question is this something that we can heal from? And if so, right, like, how do we even begin the pursuit of it?
Yeah, it's a lifelong healing process from my perception. Like, I think some of those biological predispositions or initial physiological responses that dates back to caveman days. So, well, one, there's a documentary on Netflix right now titled The Mind Explained, and
The
there's
mind
two
explained.
episodes. Yep, one episode. There's several episodes, but two that feel relevant for right now. One is the anxiety episode, and one is the mindfulness episode. So in
Okay.
these episodes, they talk about how when we are faced with a threat, think about the cavemen. They were walking around, and all of a sudden they getting chased by a tiger, a lion. Like they are
Right.
really in danger. So their body does certain reactions. The breathing faster, that's a reaction. Your heartbeat going, your hands are sweaty. We are still having those same responses. Our bodies are wired to respond the same way. So you're in your house, all of a sudden your legs feel tingly. You ain't got to run nowhere, but we were genetically designed that the blood rushes to the legs so you can flee. Right? So you might be sitting in the house, you got restless leg. You don't know why you just can't, your legs just got to keep moving. That could be a response to stress, to trauma. There's also ways that the hyperventilating, so when we talk about healing, one, becoming aware of your triggers is invaluable. Figuring out what are the strategies that may have historically been effective in soothing that, and then what are the things I can add to enrich the experience moving forward. So, as a kid, when I was really upset, I loved to curl up in a ball with a teddy or a soft pillow, and I would just like breathe into it. There was something about breathing into it and smelling it. I'm just telling you all my business, Faith, but there was something about that experience of like breathing out and breathing in with that soft presence that was so soothing. So now, as a grown woman, I'm in my 40s. I have no problem grabbing a pillow, a stuffed teddy, and I'm going to cuddle and I'm going to cry and I'm going to breathe. That was something that had worked historically and it still works today. I'll probably still be doing that when I'm 80, if I get to live that long. There's just some things that, so when we talk about healing, it's tapping into the things that can bring comfort in the moment, because the goal is to help us de-escalate,
Hmm.
not be in a panic state. I mean, ideally, I would love to be able to say, yes, we can heal from trauma and no longer have trauma responses. Unfortunately, because of the complexity of the biochemical system, unless you do a form of therapy, there's something called EMDR that really allows you to tap into your trauma in a different way and sort of make some brain reconnections. You could do it that way, right? Like there's some really aggressive forms of treatment. But for individuals who maybe want to just do like recognizing what I need to do to move forward, I'm going to have to be diligent and vigilant every single day about managing my trauma responses, right? When I hear somebody when something triggers me, I'm not going to just react. I'm not just going to kick in. So, what I used to do, I'm going to be intentional about how do I respond to this in a way that's well and that doesn't cause more problems.
What might, I think that it's those, that sounds a lot like, tools or mechanisms in which allow
Mm-hmm.
us to kind of go through those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Say one of the tools or the mechanisms in which someone chooses to do is therapy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking about that. But what might one expect during the process of
Mm-hmm.
healing?
Yeah. I think that the process of healing is non-linear. I think it's really difficult to predict. And I think for every individual, it looks quite differently. So some folks, healing might only take 6, 8, 12 sessions. For some folks, it's a lifelong process. And I would recommend that some people stay in therapy, right? Or stay on a certain medication for their life, just because depending on your own biological predisposition and biophysical makeup, there's just the gift is an individualized treatment plan. So I will say no two experiences look the same. My relationships with each of my clients is different, but for the most part what's similar is you gonna come in, We gonna do an intake, and during that intake, I'm interviewing you, you interviewing me. We finding out, do we really vibe together? Do I feel comfortable? Because some folks feel like I went to therapy and all they did was ask me questions, right? They didn't even, that I think to acknowledge that the healing, that's not the first thing we jump into. I'm not during the first session trying to have you open up your deepest, darkest wounds because I don't know what's down there either. And I don't know if you have the skills to manage it. Right.
Right.
And so in the beginning, it's really about assessment, getting to know you. I think the folks are opening up a lot. They're feeling maybe more connected. But once we shift into the work, once we shift into developing the toolkit, once we shift into opening up the traumas, that's when I think folks start to have really intense emotional responses and can find themselves either feeling really invested in the work or kind of terrified by it. There's nothing wrong with if you open something up and you're like, I am not yet ready to tackle that. I don't have the resources emotionally to tackle it, mentally. My work schedule don't allow me to tackle it, right? For some people, I say, do not take your butt to therapy in the middle of your work day. Because if you open some up and you got to go back into that office and let the wrong person say the wrong thing to you, I don't want you losing your job. So I would rather
Right.
I would rather you create a space so that whatever is about to get opened, we can attend to. And again, I know I'm talking a lot about privilege because there's a privilege of being able to be selective about when you do the work, right? Sometimes our work shows up, we didn't even know, right? I could be in the kitchen cooking. Let me smell a certain scent. I'm back at my grandma's house. And
Yeah.
if my grandma's house was a war zone, I'm back in a war zone. You know?
Even in my pursuit, so I pursued therapy for the first time when I was, let's say, 26-ish, right? Nobody told me about therapy. I don't think I knew anyone who had gone to therapy.
Mm.
But I just, it was funny. I think that I got tired of trying to fix myself. And then I realized that it's not about fixing myself, but it really is about like healing from shit.
Mm.
Like I remember I went it's so funny, so I'm gonna tell on myself. So I remember I was just like, when I first went to Dr. Brown, I was like, Dr. Brown, I think I got ADHD. He was like, okay, well, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do all these different tests, right? So went through like all these cognitive behavioral tests, da 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 da. And then so I remember afterwards, so I was like, so doc, so what is the conclusion? He said, Faith, the conclusion is you don't want to do things you don't want to do.
Come on.
I said, no, doc. I said, I know I got it because I can't concentrate. Like, what about this? And he's like, you don't want to do things that you don't want to do.
Wow.
And I was just like, wow.
Did you were more comfortable putting a diagnosis on it
Uh-huh.
when really it was attached to behavioral choices?
Yeah. And so I was just like, wow. And he said, so what we're going to figure out is what you really want to do. And we're going to get you there. And so what I really wanted to do, I really wanted to get the hell up out of LA. And I really wanted to go to grad school. And that was what our work resolved around. Of course, it resolved around a lot of other stuff as well, right? But like it
But
it was
sometimes,
so
Faith, sometimes that's what happens. Folks will come in with a self-diagnosis, right? They like, doc, this is what I need to be well. And upon further reflection, further assessment, it's a whole nother set of issues. And those issues sometimes are harder, but sometimes they're easier. Like sometimes the
yeah.
thing we need to do is like get off social media,
Ugh.
right? Take a break. Sometimes what we need to do, put the wine away, take an abstinence break, right?
Yep.
Sometimes what we need to do, decrease engagement with certain behaviors that are distressing to our lives. But what we would rather do is be like, no, I can't get that up. It's got to be something more complicated.
Right. Right.
I actually think the gift of you pursuing therapy, even though you never had exposure to it, it taps into this idea, and this is one of my beliefs, many things, just about everything we need in this world, we already have right within us. Maybe we haven't tapped into it. Maybe we haven't peeled back the layers to see it, right? Because I think trauma, stress can start to block the gifts. So if the gift is here, which it's always there,
Yep.
things can start to cover it up and make it feel inaccessible. And the gift is tapping back into that, which is why meditation is so powerful.
Oh, Doc, say that again. That was deep right
Yeah,
there.
that's a good,
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
gift is always
the
there.
gift is always there. What we were born with, who we were created to be, like we are, it is, I believe, if we have so many of the things we need already within us. And so if we can clear away the gunk, we
Hmm.
can get to something that has been preserved. And oftentimes it's right there waiting for you to tap into. So even though you hadn't seen a model of somebody pursuing therapy, something in you knew, I need additional help. I can't do it by myself,
Hmm.
right? I can't. And I feel like if we could trust that, that would help with despair. That would help with feeling purposeless or feeling like there is no meaning. I think tapping back into
Yeah.
our why, tapping back into our gifts, which is why I always say, go back to what brought you joy back in the day. Did you like writing as a kid? Write and see what happens. Did you like coloring as a kid? Color, see what happens. Did you like singing, dancing, twirling? Do those things and see what happens because you're tapping back into the gift.
Yes, yes. That, I mean, I think that I know that it might sound, simple as it may be, but I think that that is so real. Like, I think of therapy is not just like, okay, I have to go because there's all of this trauma, but it's also like, get your joy back.
Hmm.
Get your peace of mind back. Get, get to a place where you're not so damn stressed or so burnt out where you just can't do anything but go to sleep or drink your wine or smoke your weed or what have you because you just are depleted.
Yeah. Well, and you see again the manifestation of that unresolved trauma or of that
Uh-huh.
pain or of those insecurities, right? Maybe you're somebody who really judgy of other people, really critical of others. That's data, right? I feel like when we are
uh,
not in tune with who we are and who we want to be in this world, we end up really projecting some of that onto others, and we have to be real careful. And I think each of us have to be careful of what we take in, right? You don't want somebody else's unresolved mess to become your mess. So if you in a work environment and it's toxic and the boss, you think of them like your daddy, we got an issue. You know what I mean?
right,
Every
right.
time you go in the office, you reverting back to childhood. That those kind of dynamics that leads to burnout, resentment, gets all in our body. We not well. Yeah, it's really powerful work. I don't think therapy is only about healing trauma. I think that's one key component, but I also think sometimes, yeah, as you said, finding your joy, remembering how to laugh, not taking things so seriously. And there's something you said. You said, I know this might sound simple. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Therapists are people. We are people who went to school, read some books, right? I wrote some papers. I've done some stuff. I know stuff, but also I've lived. And it is through those lived experiences that I've learned so much. And when I share with clients the wisdom, sometimes it is the most basic, simple thing. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Make room for quiet time and stillness, right? I think people are surprised at how much healing and soothing can happen just with a cup of tea,
Hmm.
just with sensory deprivation. Cut the lights off, cut the music off, cut the screens off, and sit with yourself. There is something so simple about that, but so restorative.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yesterday I had a therapy session and yesterday I was really depleted and I knew that I was, but I felt like I had all these things that I needed to do. At the time of recording this, I'm 9 months pregnant. And I'm launching both the podcast and giving birth on the same day. And I was having issues with social media. I was frustrated with a sibling. Like it was just all of the things. And um, my therapist was like, go take a walk. But then I go to the door, have all my jacket on and everything, and it's raining outside. And I was just like, well, what in the and so I came back. I just, I took off all my stuff and I was like, you know what? I'm about to take a nap. And
Mm.
so I was like, I'm gonna just take a nap. I'm tired. Like
Hmm.
my brain is died, fried, and indignified. And so I
Mm.
took a nap and it was exactly what I needed. I hadn't taken a nap in a long time, right? And so like taking that nap was everything that I needed. And then what I did in the evening, once I put the baby down, I took a long, probably like an hour and a half long bath
Mm.
The water got cold. Hubs came in, poured some, hot water up in there from, the tea kettle.
Faith, I've done
uh,
that before too.
yes,
I've done that same thing because I feel like folks are like, well, I guess, because some people aren't bathers. I get it. But I'm like, if you want a long, long bath and that water chill, let a little bit out, turn that hot water on, and
yes.
just start it all up again. Put the bubble. Your goal and the gift of that example you gave, sometimes we might want to do a behavior and the universe says you're not doing that behavior and we got
Yeah,
to find some alternatives. Also, sometimes a person will tell us do X, Y, and Z when really what we need is different than that. And so I love that you honored your body. Congratulations on being 9 months. That's amazing. All the things you're
thank
working on
you.
right now. I mean, this is a lot of doors opening. It sounds like a lot of stress. But I want to acknowledge that one, we're resilient is all get out and we can handle way more than we might even believe. But also, we do have to pace ourselves, right? Because life is not a marathon. I mean, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It is long. It might feel really short, but the truth of the matter is, there's so many opportunities. Every second is an opportunity for choice and change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So you talked about having like a nice cup of tea,
Yep.
a long bath. You talked a
Hmm.
lot about like meditation. And
Hmm.
meditation is something that's always constantly thrown out there. And I think that
Hmm.
for me, as someone whose mind is constantly going,
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm the perfect meditator, if that makes sense.
There's no such thing.
No such thing, right?
Even the gurus, and that again on that the Mind Explained episode on Netflix, they have a meditation episode, a mindfulness episode, because so many of us forget that it's a practice. It's not a destination. You're not intended to sort of to perfect it. Even the monks who have been doing it for always, they always talk about the ways that you have to bring your mind back into the moment, because your mind
Mhm.
naturally wants to wander. Bringing it back is the gift. And when you learn how to bring your mind back while being still, you can learn how to bring it back during chaos. Because it's during the chaos that we tend to wild out, right? When we
Right.
are at our wits' end, we don't always breathe deeply. We don't always give the person grace and acceptance. We don't even hear what they're saying half the time. We just ready to defend ourselves and win. And so I think there's
Mhm.
such a gift in practicing stillness during non stress times so that when the stressful times come, you have access to the skills. So there's a meditation I love by Deepak Chopra. It's available on YouTube. There's also the Headspace app or the Calm app. There's a wonderful app by some African American meditators titled Liberate. Like there's just so many options. And so I think trying different things. Some people prefer a walking meditation. It is not just sitting cross-legged with your
Yeah.
eyes closed, right? There's just so many ways. So I would say mindfulness is one of my favorite coping strategies, but I've got a bunch, Faith. Like I think exercising is invaluable. Whether you're walking around the block, walking around your house, doing a couple of push-ups, sit-ups, squats, there's something about that physical exertion that goes a long way, you know?
So
And
you were
yeah.
talking about, so earlier on in our conversation, you were talking about how like writing
Hmm.
could be like a really good tool, right? And
Hmm.
so for the folks who might not necessarily like to journal,
Hmm.
um
You
how
know,
might
a voice memo is just as valuable.
okay,
I
talk
think.
about voice memos.
So I don't know if you've seen Beyonce's Life is But a Dream. Beyonce talks to this computer and she said, this is how I get my stuff out. Like it's a documentation of your life. So in this day and age, we often all have our phones with us. So we can just open the notes app and just start typing. I'm feeling blah, blah, blah. But before we let the words out of our mouth, I often say, write it out. Write it for yourself, sleep on it. And when you wake up, read it and see, do I really want to send this email? Do I really want to send this text? Is this the tone I want to use? Is this the words I want to use? It's about slowing it down. So writing is an invaluable skill. I think it's not just writing to yourself, because I think journaling is kind of like, I'm going to write and document my life. There's something we can do, an intervention titled like write letter writing for others. And so you write a letter maybe to someone who assaulted you, or you write a letter to a parent or loved one from whom you're not connected, or you want to express some hard feelings. Like through the writing, there's something so cathartic of honoring your truth. And you can decide, do I ever share this with another person or not? Right? The experience is for you, not for them. Right? If you give them the letter, that's a gift. But for some folks, it's just about writing it. Sometimes you burn it, you tear it up, sometimes you keep it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually really, really interesting. I think I was listening to like this. No, actually, I was talking to my on TV, and she was talking about she had just listened to like this NPR episode of the creator of the Vagina Monologues. I forget her name, and
Yeah.
how her writing a letter to her abuser ultimately is what really allowed her to break through and then go on
Yes.
to create the Vagina Monologues.
Do you know how
So
much art is rooted in trauma?
yeah, yeah. So I mean,
Mhm.
it's fascinating. It's real
Yeah.
fascinating, and you know, it's interesting. I think that I used to journal all the time back in the good day, and I think that probably because you know my mom read a whole bunch of my journals, or you know maybe my brother or somebody. I think that I got out of the habit of being able to be like just completely vulnerable, like in the written journal, with the fear that somebody might read my thoughts. But then I discovered an online app called Penzu,
Mm.
which allows me to basically have an online journal, and I can access it through either my laptop or computer or either an app on my phone. But I
Mm-hmm.
will definitely be sure to link the information with regards to your wonderful practice that's
Yeah.
located in downtown Chicago, but now all over Illinois, you know, in the times of quarantine. So I'll
Well,
be,
and the teaching, the training, the workshops, we do those worldwide.
yep.
And so if folks are wanting to further the conversation, I'm available. Faith, if you ever want to have me back, I'd be honored.
Awesome, awesome. Well, listen, you know, you just said it, so I definitely will probably take you up on that offer to do so. So with that, it's a wrap.
Thank you so much for listening. It is truly my hope that you both enjoyed and gained something from it. And if so, be sure to share this episode with another queen that could benefit. Also, if you are willing and able, please leave me a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcast. That is how we spread the good word, y'all. And in the meantime, be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at the Sister Circle Podcast. And be sure to check out the website, thesistercirclepodcast.com. There you can subscribe to our mailing list to ensure you get reminders about when new episodes drop and receive our monthly newsletter that's filled with great resources. You can check out our show notes, resources, and blog. And you can send me a message if you want to be on the show, have an idea for the show, would like to collaborate, or sponsor the show. With love, Faith.